while not every first-person shooter has or needed to take a page from the over-the-top, violent, and often wacky gameplay, some certainly have, and to great effect. With results ranging from the decent to the outstanding, it seems to be a playbook that largely works when the game using it goes all in. Turbo Overkill is looking to be the newest shooter to take advantage of the more outrageous notes of that flavor, as well as its frenetic cycle of leaping and boosting around arenas, killing everything in sight, replenishing health and ammo, and repeating in the next area. Thankfully, while that visceral action cycle does manage to fit like two blood-soaked gloves on the cybernetic hands of our main protagonist, the game also seems to be doing the arguably more important work of making those elements all feel organic and necessary to the game, and blending them with Turbo Overkill's own ideas and aesthetic. So far, I can't come up with any good reasons for it to turn back. This game is just good old-fashioned ridiculous first-person shooter fun. Like the modern and retro classics of the genre that inspire it, Turbo Overkill's intro sequence isn't as much of a prologue as it is the inside half of a book jacket. It doesn't waste time with pleasantries and clearly just wants to throw you to the wolves. Those that know what they're getting into will literally hit the ground running with how familiar the double jumping, dashing, and shooting inherently feel. Sound effects for each gun are impactful and kinetic. Control is extremely swift and responsive, and the chainsaw leg must be acknowledged as one of the best melee weapon ideas of recent years. Your weaponry isn't just limited to what's lying around though, as there are terminals you can come across where you can buy upgrades, ammo, and weapons, as well as assign different perks and abilities to different limbs, furthering the augmentation theme of the character and giving a pretty great excuse to the game to have more variety than it otherwise would. The game likes to throw some enemies at you in hordes that force you to stick around and wipe them out, as well as small to medium-sized squads that can more quickly be blasted through as you platform and wall run to the next major battle. It's a nice rhythm for sure and seems well paced out. The simple structure goes well with the PS2 era low poly graphics. With that though, enemies that I've encountered so far have far less general intelligence than average. Most of them just run straight for you or stand there and unload on you until one of you dies. Certainly a game like this doesn't really need super intelligent AI though. In fact, being mostly chainsaw fodder might be a better fit for this game's basic enemies anyway. Plus it also subtly enhances the retro undertones of the game. Most of the challenge from these monsters is simply dictated by how much health they have and how much damage they dish out, which, combined with the frantic leaping around and the constant exchange of ammo, health, and armor, it makes everything result in a simple but satisfying workout for your brain as well as your wrists. So don't get Turbo Overkill's simplicity confused with a lack of difficulty or variety. It works well with what it does. It wisely seems to stop short of being overwhelming, but it does deliberately flirt with the line. This indicates two things to me. One, that developers over at Trigger Happy Interactive have a very solid grasp of how much stimuli the game's audience wants, and two, an equally solid grasp on how to deliver it. This self-awareness and finely tuned incline of challenge is a key component to not just making a good shooter, but a great one. With the simplicity and straightforwardness of something from 15 or 20 years ago, the aesthetic and general vibe of Turbo Overkill could easily be compared with the games from that era. But with a somewhat derivative dystopian cyberpunk city almost entirely illuminated by neon, the game threatens to look a tad bit generic to my eye. I think it's fair to say that this setting is a bit overused at this point. Thankfully, the game often whisks you out of that to different areas with different looks pretty regularly to give the Blade Runner color palette a rest. The indoor locations in particular seem deliberately keen on mixing things up aesthetically, but not in a way that feels disjointed from the rest of it. Hopefully, as the game goes on, we see the developer flex their artistic muscles a little more, as I'd hate to see the ideas of this game wind up held back by its packaging. A clear-cut story about stopping the bad guy from taking over the world and an augmented cyborg with an attitude problem as a main character is the perfect amount of setup, as it fits with the setting well and doesn't distract from the main course of Turbo Overkill, its gameplay. All that said, a couple of gripes have emerged for me during my time with the game. Firstly, there is presently no controller support of any kind that I was able to activate at the time of writing this. I'd be shocked if this didn't show up eventually, but it's worth noting it hasn't yet. Also, while I appreciate the extravagant death animations, with chunks of gory pulp flying every which way, once mixed with my own muzzle flash and other enemies' fire, it can be a bit much and obscure my vision to the point where I got totally disoriented. This blinding veil of craziness takes just a little bit too long to lift, and it led me to probably about half of the deaths I've had so far, with me accidentally falling to my death or being killed by an enemy I had no way of knowing was even shooting at me, since I couldn't see more than 5 feet in front of me for those precious milliseconds that I needed. I don't have to use my imagination very much to foresee this becoming an even bigger problem in later levels with more enemies and more treacherous level designs. Granted, deaths of any sort result in an almost instantaneous respawn, but I'd still rather those deaths be purely my fault, and so far I feel like too many of them aren't. Also, some of the corridors and pathways are a bit too samey, which becomes a problem when the game needs you to backtrack after finding a key or flipping a switch for a door that's located in a previously visited area. This results in a little bit of wandering around, looking for any sign that I'm going in the right direction. The game does occasionally give you subtle waypoint markers on screen, but not nearly often enough to mitigate this. Normally, I wouldn't mind this sort of thing, but in a game that is so dedicated to non-stop fast action, when the action does stop, even for just a moment, you really do notice it. So if I were to ask for any tweaks to the game prior to its full release, I'd want to see the path forward be a little more consistently obvious, and I'd like to see the time it takes for clouds of gore to clear sped up a hair or two. Emphasis on the word tweaks though, as these are minor gripes at best. Largely, I'm impressed with how well Turbo Overkill is shaping up. Despite a relatively low price point for a game like this, and a couple kinks it could stand to work out, I can easily see it competing well with the juggernauts of the genre. That's all for now. If you enjoy what you saw, please hit the like button. And if you're new to the channel, now is a great time to subscribe. We upload brand new videos every single day. After subscribing, don't forget to enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon. Thanks for watching this video, and we'll see you next time, right here on Gaming Bolt.